Welcome to my personal archive. I am the Keeper. This isn't just a crime channel, it's a record of our fascinating inability to be normal. Here, we open doors that should have been locked forever and analyze the fingerprints that darkness leaves behind. If you seek comfort or easy answers, this isn't the place for you. But if you have the stomach for the naked truth, pull up a chair. I have the keys. The world we inhabit, with its daily rituals and the false promise of safety, is in truth a fragile stage. Beneath the surface of lit streets and cozy homes, a primordial darkness lurks, a force capable of erupting and consuming lives, leaving behind only questions and indelible scars. On the Keeper channel, our mission is to uncover these shadows, to examine the fragments of the human psyche at its breaking point, and to understand the abysses that open when evil manifests. We do not seek sensationalism, but rather the raw truth, the forensic analysis of the soul, so that we may, perhaps, comprehend the incomprehensible. Today, we dive into two cases that challenge our perception of safety and intimacy, revealing how darkness can hide in plain sight, even behind the most familiar smiles. We begin with a disappearance that turned into a nightmare of betrayal in a coastal city that would never be the same again. The enigma of Valéria Mendes. Florianópolis, Santa Catarina, is an island of breathtaking beauty, a paradise for artists and dreamers. In 2018, the city was home to Valéria Mendes, a 26-year-old woman with expressive eyes and undeniable talent for visual arts. A dedicated student, Valéria lived a vibrant life, surrounded by friends and family. Her days were filled with university classes, visits to galleries, and animated conversations at local cafes. Valéria embodied hope, the promise of a bright future, but that promise was brutally stolen. On the night of April 17, 2018, Valéria attended a friend's birthday party. She left around midnight, promising to send a message once she got home. Security cameras from a building near hers, in the busy Lagoa da Conceição neighborhood, captured her silhouette entering the main gate of the residential complex shortly after. She seemed fine, walking with the ease of someone returning to the safety of home. However, Valéria never reached her third-floor apartment. The promised message was never sent. The next morning, Valéria's absence was noted. Her parents, who lived a few blocks away, tried contacting her without success. Friends reported that she hadn't replied to messages. Concern quickly turned into panic. Upon reaching Valéria's apartment, they found the door locked from the inside. Nothing seemed out of place. Her laptop on the table, the phone charger plugged into the wall, the bed neatly made. There were no signs of forced entry, nor indications of a struggle. It was as if Valéria had simply vanished into thin air. The police were called. Inspector Detective Carlos Almeida, a veteran from the Homicide Division, took on the case. His experience taught him that trace-free disappearances in closed environments were among the most challenging, often indicating intimate knowledge of the location or the victim by the perpetrator. Almeida combed through every inch of the apartment and building corridor, spoke to every neighbor. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. The only anomaly, almost imperceptible, was a small note pinned to Valéria's fridge door with a magnet. Handwritten in elegant script, it read, "The colors of your soul have faded. Where is the glow that once guided me?" It was chilling, but could have been from a secret admirer, or even a poetic musing by Valéria herself. Police initially dismissed it as irrelevant. The city of Florianópolis fell into shock. Valéria's story dominated the headlines. Desperate pleas from her parents, Donna Beatriz and Mr. Roberto, aired across all news channels. Posters with Valeria's smiling face were plastered across the island. The community gathered to search, combing beaches and trails, but to no avail. With each passing day, hope diminished, replaced by a persistent, icy despair. Theories multiplied. Had Valeria run away? Was it a kidnapping? Or was it the work of a silent predator, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike? Months dragged on in agonizing limbo. Detective Almeida, though exhausted, refused to give up. That note on the fridge, once considered secondary, began to haunt him. The phrase, "Where is the glow that once guided me?" suggested a level of intimacy beyond that of a mere admirer. He ordered a re-examination of all of Valeria's belongings, even those that had seemed irrelevant. That's when an unexpected breakthrough occurred. In a small thrift store downtown, a customer discovered an old Dell laptop matching the model Valeria owned, on sale for a suspiciously low price. It wasn't her regular laptop, but a friend of Valeria's who happened to visit the store recognized it. The police were notified. A forensic analysis of the device revealed a hidden, deeply encrypted folder. Inside, a series of messages, emails, and drafted letters sent to Valeria, some unanswered, others seemingly ignored. The sender identified himself only as the Watcher. The messages were disturbing. They started as compliments on her art, but quickly evolved into intimate knowledge of Valeria's routine, the cafe she frequented, the route she took from university to home, even the clothes she wore on specific days. "I saw you today on campus. Your blue dress was like the summer sky," said one. "The melody you hummed on the bus this morning brought me joy," read another. The Watcher wasn't a distant stranger. He was someone observing her, surrounding her closely. Paranoia set in. Who was he? Almeida's team worked tirelessly to trace the origin of the emails. The handwriting on the fridge note was compared against samples from all Valeria's classmates at university. And then the truth surfaced, more shocking than anyone could have imagined. The Watcher was Leo Bittencourt, a classmate of Valeria's in the same cohort, known for his shyness and reclusive nature. Seemingly harmless, Leo had developed a sick obsession with Valeria, a form of admiration that mutated into a possessive fantasy. He was the shadow, always present, invisible to her, but omnipresent in her life. Confronted with the digital evidence and handwriting match, Leo broke down. His confession was a distorted account of unrequited love and a pathological desire to protect Valeria from a world he viewed as corrupt. He admitted to approaching Valeria at the entrance of her building that night on April 17th. He convinced her to come to his apartment for an urgent conversation, pretending to be in personal crisis, exploiting Valeria's natural compassion. Once there, Leo didn't intend immediate physical harm, but instead to keep her safe from her own decisions and from the outside world. He deprived her of freedom, isolating her in a makeshift room in a property owned by his family in the rural countryside. The details that followed, while not explicitly graphic, painted a picture of prolonged suffering and despair. Leo, in his distorted worldview, believed he was caring for her, but in reality, he subjected her to brutal isolation, deprivation, and control. Valeria, exhausted and weakened, tried to resist, to confront Leo. In a moment of panic and desperation, triggered by Valeria's refusal to accept his protection, the situation escalated horribly, culminating in her death by asphyxiation, the tragic outcome of his possessive delusion. Leo then buried Valeria's body in a shallow grave on an abandoned rural property miles away in a vain attempt to erase his actions. Valéria Mendes's body was eventually recovered. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death, along with evidence of sustained and extreme violence before her final breath. Leo Bittencourt was tried and convicted for kidnapping, concealment of a corpse, and aggravated murder. His shy facade was peeled back, revealing a calculating and selfish predator whose obsession destroyed not only a life, but the peace of an entire community. Valéria Mendes's story is a grim reminder that darkness doesn't always reside in the darkest alleys, but may hide behind the most familiar faces, weaving its web silently until the moment of rupture. If a confidant's betrayal is an abyss that confronts us with the malevolence of an individual, what happens when evil manifests in broader form? A nearly invisible pattern stretching across miles, claiming lives without leaving obvious traces of violence? That is the terrifying question we'll face in our next case, where an imperceptible shadow crept along rural roads, leaving behind only death and a disturbing mystery. From the personal pain of individual betrayal, we now return to a threat that manifests more broadly, a series of deadly events that, at first glance, seemed disconnected but under closer analysis, revealed a sinister pattern. This is the story of a predator who operated in the shadows, in the vast and isolated rural landscapes, redefining what we understand as violence and human vulnerability. The Ghosts of the Western Route. Between 2005 and 2007, the rural highways crisscrossing inland São Paulo, linking small towns and remote farms, became the setting for a string of mysterious deaths. At first glance, there was nothing connecting them. Isolated incidents catalogued as natural fatalities or unfortunate accidents. But Inspector Lucia Santos from the Civil Police of Campinas had instincts that didn't allow her to accept such simple explanations. The first officially recorded victim was Marcos Toledo, a 48-year-old truck driver. On November 12, 2005, his body was found inside the cabin of his truck, parked at an abandoned gas station on Highway SP304. Cause of death: sudden heart attack. The scene showed no signs of struggle. Marcos's money and belongings were untouched. What did catch one officer's attention, however, was a small and almost imperceptible incision mark in the shape of a V on the inside of Marcos's forearm, like a stamp or minor abrasion. It was noted but dismissed in the official report. Less than 6 months later, on May 3, 2006, Ana Paula Rodriguez, a 32-year-old saleswoman, was found lifeless in her car on an isolated stretch of SP 340. Once again, the cause of death was diagnosed as a heart attack, and once again, the small V-shaped mark was found on her arm. This time, it was Inspector Lucia Santos's team that arrived at the scene. With her analytical mind and eye for detail, Lucia noted the eerie coincidence: 2 heart attack deaths in remote areas, both marked with the same peculiar insignia. Her internal alarm rang. This wasn't coincidence. Inspector Santos began retroactively investigating the deaths, searching for similar cases. Her research uncovered 3 more victims over 2 years, all with varying profiles: a sales rep, a university student, and an agronomist. Yet, all were in transit, and all bore the mysterious V mark. The official causes in each case were sudden cardiac or vascular events, yet without clear explanations, especially in previously healthy individuals. The pattern was subtle, but undeniable. Lucia formed a task force, and the case was named the Ghosts of the Western Route. The predator's profile began to take shape. This wasn't a typical criminal. He wasn't seeking robbery nor explicit sexual violence. His signature was invisibility, the simulation of natural death, and the mysterious mark. What was he doing? How was he executing these killings without leaving obvious forensic signs of violence? A team of FBI criminal profilers was consulted due to the case's unique nature. They suggested an individual with deep knowledge of human physiology and psychology, someone capable of manipulating both the body and the mind to induce collapse. The small V incisions were pivotal clues. They didn't seem like defensive wounds, but rather intentionally placed marks. Were they used to administer substances? Yet the autopsies revealed no common toxins. The investigation delved into the victims' lives, looking for any connections. What emerged was that each victim, shortly before their death, had stopped at a gas station or isolated rest stop along the western route. At these stops, they seemed to have brief interactions with someone before continuing their journey. The emerging theory was that the predator didn't attack in the traditional physical sense. Instead, he approached victims during a moment of vulnerability, perhaps under a friendly pretense, and then, through a combination of intense psychological manipulation and discreet administration of agents mimicking natural cardiac events, perhaps a drug cocktail that induced stress and a sudden fatal spike in heart rate and blood pressure, he induced collapse. The V mark served as the entry point, disguised as nothing more than a scratch. It was a form of undetectable violence, a silent murder. The profile deepened. The perpetrator was likely a white male, aged 30 to 50, intelligent, methodical, with a distorted sense of justice or morality. Someone with medical or paramedical training, or deep knowledge of chemistry and pharmacology. The search turned toward former health professionals with histories of unethical or experimental behavior. That's how Ricardo Suarez entered the radar. A former paramedic, dismissed from a hospital in Campinas for disruptive behavior and unauthorized experimentation with protocols. Ricardo, nicknamed the Silent One by former colleagues, was known for his bizarre fascination with how the human body responds to stress and certain chemical agents. He had published obscure articles on online forums about methods of purification and behavioral correction for those he deemed deviants. His ideology was a warped version of justice, in which he saw himself as enforcer upon those he considered morally flawed. Under court order, Lucia Santos's team monitored Ricardo. He lived a recluse life in a trailer near a lake, not far from one of the Western Route's highways. A search of his residence revealed a disturbing arsenal of knowledge, books on forensic medicine, organic chemistry, behavioral psychology. Most disturbing, however, was a small locked box containing a collection of trophies, personal items, a ring, a watch, a keychain, belonging to the victims. Beside them, a detailed journal described each operation, each purification, and a map of the Western route, marking each victim's meeting point and death site. The V mark was described as the judge's signature. Ricardo Suarez, the Silent One, was arrested. His confession was as cold and calculated as his crimes. He admitted to approaching victims under various pretexts, asking for help with a flat tire or offering a remedy for a headache, while discreetly administering a cocktail of drugs that, in combination with the stress of the interaction and the remote location, induced a fatal heart collapse. He saw his victims as symbols of societal decay, and himself as a cleansing agent, a gardener pruning weeds. Ricardo was convicted of multiple counts of aggravated murder. The case of the ghosts of the Western Route shattered trust in the safety of Brazil's highways and exposed an insidious form of violence, where the weapon wasn't a knife or a gun, but the human body itself and the twisted mind of a man. This case reminds us, danger isn't always obvious. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers in codes and marks, waiting for someone to notice. The cases of Valéria Mendes and the ghosts of the Western Route stand as testimony to the complexity of evil and the fragility of the human condition. In a world where darkness assumes so many forms, from personal obsession to serial psychopathy, vigilance and understanding become our strongest defenses. At The Keeper, we will continue to shine a light on these dark corners, dissecting the minds behind the most heinous acts, so that we may not only honor the victims, but also arm ourselves with the knowledge that may one day prevent such horrors from happening again. Truth, no matter how painful, is the first step toward protection. And that is what drives us, always, to keep searching.